Hello and welcome back to RP1. In the last couple episodes, we've been focusing on the X-Plane program, and we have a little bit more to do with that, but I've been getting a little antsy, and I've been wanting to get back to the orbital side of our program. So today we're going to do a little bit of both. We have 2 flights to pick up the remaining supersonic science, and we're going to have both our pilot Sebastian and Angela take care of that in the beginning, but we're going to go through that very briefly. And then we're going to focus the rest of the episode on going orbital. First, we're just going to come in here and just show that we have not unlocked the new administrator yet for our flight science. We get that after 25 kilometers, and we haven't made that milestone yet, so nothing new there. We're going to start by editing our jet plane named Charles, because in the last episode we had access to these air brakes, but we did not include them in the original design, and overall just having those air brakes are going to help out tremendously when it comes to landing. So we're going to go ahead and outfit that plane with that. And so now I'm just going to take a look at our contracts to see what we can do and what we should spend our time on. The next contract in the X-Plane program is going to require us to go to speeds of Mach 2, so I went and did a test flight of Charles to see if it could handle that, and it absolutely could, so I was very happy with that. So we're going to be utilizing these jet planes for more than just the single contract, which is good. It's a good way to balance your budget and be most efficient with that. So now that she's been recovered, we're gonna bring in Rosie for some edits. Firstly, we're gonna get rid of this 4th wheel that wound its way in there, and then we're going to go ahead and bring back the tail fin that was broken off on his first landing. And she too gets a pair of air brakes to help her land as well. And then just make sure my staging is correct, and then we'll save these edits, and Angela Watson will be ready to fly this again in no time. So we're just going to be doing a little bit of time warping. We have Sebastian Hahn in jet plane proficiency training, and so he should be ready, and it's timed pretty well to the mounting of the aircraft, or mounting to the aircraft, I should say, for the air launch. However, it completed in the middle of the night, so we warped to the morning, and when we go to air launch it, we put in our parameters that we want, the appropriate distance, and then we find out that we had once again forgotten to train Sebastian in the mission, the actual mission itself. So we're going to go ahead and pop him right back into the classroom. Thankfully, mission training only takes about an hour or so, so it doesn't remove too much time, but it's an hour or so that I could have done while I was warping to the morning time instead of waiting an extra hour to launch. I'm going to go ahead and throw Angela Watson into just general aircraft proficiency while I'm at it. Alright, always remember to pack a chute, and let's get this mission undergoing. So I'm going to cut this very brief, since these 2 missions aren't actually to complete contracts. They're just to pick up the remaining supersonic science that we had left over from the previous flight, because each flight will only allow you to take 2.2 science. So we're going to run this flight just 2 more times. So I'm going to basically show you that I get myself, using the autopilot, I get myself to 15,000 meters, and then I hold level into supersonic flight and just hold the speed of 265 to 260 meters per second, long enough to collect all the science, and then I'm going to bring myself home. And it's the landing that I feel is the most interesting part. This is kind of weird. I put in the heading and I decided the best way to point towards it was to bank left and pitch down, so kind of weird. Anyways, I feel like the landings are a little more interesting than the keep level and keep at the same speed for 3 minutes. So here we are, we're approaching, going a little bit faster than Angela's first approach. As you can remember, she came short of the runway. So we're using autopilot to bring us down to particular steps in altitude as we get closer and closer. And once we get close enough, we're going to go on to a hands-on approach. There we go, and it brings it down to 1,000 meters. And we're not lined up with the runway, but that's okay. We'll get there. Much better. And we bring ourselves down to about 430, and that's when we kill the autopilot and regain control manually. So we pop down the landing gear and desperately try to pull up because Sebastian doesn't want to pull off the same maneuver that Angela did. But using the new air brakes and the properly staged parachutes, he comes to a stop very easily. So all in all, not bad for Sebastian Hahn's maiden flight. Let's go ahead and recover this plane back to the warehouse using the KCT menu. There we go, recover active vessel. And we're going to go ahead and get ourselves ready for one more flight. So is that flight pushed back his retirement date by 43 days, which is pretty good. And we got 7 points of science, which allows me to go ahead and pick back up the satellite era science node that we were working on. And that's going to be crucial because for one of our contracts, we are going to need that science experiment. So as we can see, looking in our combined chart, we're not going to get that till the last step. However, we have some things to work on in between that as well. So we're going to go ahead and roll out Rosie. She is now ready to be prepped for the air launch, and we are going to get her ready to do another science flight just like Charles did. And there we go. Now it is ready to be air launched. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the right parameters again. Get ourselves a little bit closer to the KSC, and like always, forget to train my pilot in the mission. I think once I start remembering to do that, then we might be in serious trouble. So I'm going around here, and I'm not exactly sure why she's not being accepted. So I train her in general aviation, but it's still not correct. And it's not until I realize that I need to train her in the mission for the jet fighter, which I'm not fully grasping at the time because I'm not completing any contract in particular to this. I'm just flying the plane. However, turns out that by training her in the mission for jet fighter, that is what was the barrier to keep her from flying before. So once again, we're just going to show you that we are getting ourselves up to speed. We're running the flight parameters to get the supersonic flight science. And then we're just going to focus on coming back home. So Angela really wants to have a better landing this time. She did manage to get the plane onto the runway, but she broke off a couple pieces of it. And, just all in all wants to prove that she can be as good of a pilot as her co-pilot Sebastian. Coming in a little slow, losing some altitude, so we have to kick on the engine a little more, pick up some more speed. keep ourselves from dipping into the drink. Lower our landing gear just in case. We are tipping down, but she's having one heck of a time. You can tell that she really was born to be a pilot. Dip our nose up, trying to keep from getting sunk into that water, that watery grass. And using the air brakes and the correct parachute staging, once again, brings us down to a safe and comfortable landing. Angela successfully picked up the last 2.2 science of our supersonic data, meaning that we can move on from that experiment into the next level of X-planes. So now it's time to build an orbit-capable rocket. As you see here, we got 3 science nodes being researched currently, and all of those are going to help towards completing these contracts. This is going to be a solar-powered science satellite, so that means it needs to be much more, or at least better than the bare minimum of what it's going to take to reach orbit. So we have to design this correctly, because rather than 140 kilometer perigee, we're going to need to have at least 300 kilometers perigee, which means it needs to, bare minimum is not going to cut it here. We need something that can overachieve if we want to do these all in a single launch. And we do want to do these all single launch. So I'm going to show you the full process of what it took from start to finish to get myself into orbit. There's some steps in here that we don't end up taking. There's some changes that we revert. There's some changes that make all the difference, and we'll be kind of going through that as we go along. We're also going to be utilizing the SRBs that we've unlocked. We spent a lot of technology and time to unlock SRB technology, so I want to utilize that in our design. So as you can see here, we have the GCRC solid rocket engine at the top that's going to finalize our stage. It's going to be our last circularization. And now we're going to deal with some liquid engines, and we're going to look at all the different options that we have and what's in the experimental options to see what is the best fit. But ultimately, we end up just going with the AJ10 early series, which is kind of a standard, but it's okay. It has a lot of upgrades available, so that means that when something has a lot of upgrades available, it means that we're more likely to be able to use it for a longer amount of time. So yes, we go ahead and grab the AJ10s. I play around with the idea of using a modular tank or a procedural tank and then just putting a mount on it, but I didn't like the way that looked, and so I tried just making my own mount using the procedural sizes and kind of just pitch it in and everything. And I did kind of like the way that it looked. I gotta say, after reviewing the footage, it looked a lot better than I had initially thought that it had. I do like this kind of tapering to the nozzle look, but I don't end up going with this. But maybe in a future rocket I'll have this. Yeah, this little kind of taper that it goes down. I don't know, there's something about it I really enjoy. This is how we used to do our V2s before we figured out the boat tail adapter fairing combination. Yep, gonna go ahead and get rid of that. Get a stringer tank and just pop the AJ10 on them out and call it a day. There you go. So we're going to adjust the size, and the AJ10 has 115 second burn, I believe, and so we're going to just try to size that appropriately, give ourselves a little extra to burn off. We're going to equip these Pioneer adjustment motors, and these are going to act as our ullage stage. They don't have a lot of thrust, but they burn for quite a bit, so you can utilize them for ullage. You just have to wait a little bit, but that's fine because they burn for a bit, but they are not to be used in a panic. And now we're going to be putting on some spherical side tanks to accommodate for some RCS thruster. We're going to be using helium. Eventually we're going to go through different options. We're going to go through helium, and we're just picking a size somewhat arbitrarily, just see what feels like the right size of RCS thrusters, and we're just going to kind of tack them on there. I don't have a lot of experience with RCS, so you know, even in stock KSP I don't really use RCS all that much. I'm going to go ahead and name this the Orb1. Very creative, I know. I'm going to put a little light on the top of it, because I feel like just because it's RP1 doesn't mean it can't have any kind of decoration. Just because it's utilitarian doesn't mean it can't be a little bit beautiful. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this all up in a fairing. And I don't really know what I'm doing right now. I am currently just kind of eyeballing a lot of these things. I am just making some educated guesses, and we will see how it goes in the testing. So that's why I just take the Goldwing 3 and just tack it on underneath, without really paying attention to things like Delta V and whether or not this is going to be capable of even handling orbit. But I'm having fun, and when you have fun, you learn things. I guess I adjust my avionics unit to be better suited for this fairing. Just gonna put one on top there, and then we're gonna go ahead and grab another truss adapter, and we will put the fairing over the engine right there. And adjust it accordingly. And there you go. It looks great. So there, I want to make sure my staging is all correct. And what I was talking about, how I didn't pay attention to my Delta V, is if you look up right now, you can see that I only have about 6,000. And anybody who's looked at a Delta V chart could tell you that I'm going to need 9,400 just to circularize. So already, from just the numbers alone, I can tell that this rocket isn't going to do much. But there's nothing quite like trial and error to teach you what you need to know. So here's where I decide to double up on that final stage, and that does give me quite a good amount of Delta V to work with from there. So that's nice. The GCRCs are pretty hefty. They have a 25-second burn time, so they can do quite a bit. And in changing the shape of it, I get a much better, much easier fairing clamshell design, whatever you want to call it. Sorry, I just got distracted by the fact that I adjusted the size of my avionics ever so slightly outside the size of the fairing, so it's just slightly too big. I did not notice that until now. It just distracted me while I was trying to talk about SRBs. Alright, so we readjusted that top a little bit, and we have, we're getting closer to what our final design is going to be. Of course, we tack on more side boosters, more casters, and we're going to get that fairing on the engine once more because I liked how that looked. Kept everything nice and sleek. And when working with rockets this big and this complicated with this many stages, whenever you take pieces apart to kind of work on other pieces, it oftentimes just messes your staging up, so you have to come back in here and redo it. Put some Pioneer adjustment motors on the lower lifting vehicle, and that's going to, when they stage to separate, that's going to help push it back away from the next stage, the orbital stage. Alright, so I'm feeling pretty confident in this design. I'm confident enough to start coloring anyways. We have 9,600 meters per second, so that is just barely able to get into orbit. And like I mentioned before, we need to make this a little bit better than just barely. But all in all, I'm feeling pretty happy with the design, and I'm getting ready to test. So let's go ahead and just give that the color, because everyone knows it flies 10% better when it has color. Alright, so we're just going to take one last look at our stage setup and our burn times, and we're going to go ahead and simulate this. So the simulation went well, but one of the things that we definitely need to address is the fact that our avionics was not rated correctly, and we did not have control of the rocket for the beginning of that launch. So let's go ahead and save and start that one again. So that was the last simulation of the night that I was recording that footage, and this footage now is the next morning. And I've had some time to think about my rocket. I've had some time to mull it over and sleep on it, and I'm going to be making some changes here. Firstly, I'm going to see if I can make any changes to the engines, any kind of upgrades, and then I want to follow that up with seeing if I can make any changes to the tanks. And it turns out that I am at the highest level of tank technology that I can currently be at right now. However, we have access to isogrid tanks, and isogrid tanks are interesting because while they are quite a bit more expensive than the traditional types of tanks, isogrids are also 40% lighter, and it's that saving in weight that is going to really give us an advantage in this situation here. So I'm going to go ahead and replace the tanks with isogrid ones, and we're going to put this rocket back together. We're also going to give it a bunch more battery, because why not? We can afford the extra weight now. So I adjust my caster engines over to a higher configuration. I'm going to forget about that for a little bit, so just remember that for later. So now what I'm going to be doing is taking all the pieces apart from the fuselage and then recreating the fuselage using isogrids. Put the bow tail back on, put the engine back on, get these fairings back on. The fairings couldn't go on while the launch pad was on there apparently. I'm going to go ahead and name that the Orb-2 because this is now a different rocket because it's made out of different materials. Once again, get the four casters on, get the wings in place, and just shift them down. So the center of mass and the center of lift are in correct positions. I go get my staging was all messed up. All sorts of messed up. And of course I removed the RCS thrusters as well as the ullage motors from the previous tank. So I have to put everything back the way that it was. There we go. Get our monopropellant all situated. Get our avionics all situated. And we're going to go ahead and simulate one more time. It's a good simulation, taught me enough. We're going to need to make some changes up here. Firstly, let's have the experiments on there that we meant to have. This is a science satellite after all. So I just throw on the first three that I see, not really paying attention, not really paying notice that there's more than three. But we'll figure that out soon enough. So I just got a thermometer, a barometer, and a magnetometer on there. Only one of those I think I can even get any science from. So we go ahead and throw on these ullage motors because we forgot to do that. We tried to use our RCS to get our ullage correctly and it didn't work, so we're going to use the Pioneers. Those will eventually get changed out, but currently they are good enough. Just get my staging all correct. And now you can see we have 10,000 delta V, which is a lot more comfortable. Can make our higher altitude orbit with that much delta V. So like I said, I want to change out these Pioneer motors. They're just they take a little too long for my comfort. So we're going to put these little snub-nosed Separatrons on there. We're going to switch out these ones while we're at it. It's a little bit complicated trying to grab them. So I'm going to reroute to the avionics core so I can take these top parts off, and then I can go ahead and readjust them the way that I see fit. And then when I'm done with that, I can just readjust the control point right back to the top probe core. It's showing that I only have 5,000 delta V, but that's because my staging, once again, is all out of whack. So, it's something that you end up having to fight with a lot with crafts this big or larger. So, it's just a learning experience. Remove the small Pioneer Separatron motors in favor of these bigger ones, which will get these casters out of the way quicker. This is always a good thing. And everything is looking great. And that brings us to 9,900 delta V, which is a wonderful amount. So that test went excellent. Now all I need to do is figure out what is holding me back from launching this. Because as you see here, we need 1958's orbital engines. So that means that there's something. But currently I am going to look at building a new launch complex. I'm trying to modify the launch complex that we have already, but when I go ahead and hit renovate, it's not going to let me go through, so I'm going to have to make a new one. It's always frustrating when I take the time to add all these extra parameters, and then it doesn't let me change it. See, as you can see, when I hit renovate, it says enter maximum tonnage, and so it's not going to it's not going to renovate the launch complex that we wanted, so we have to just make a new one. And at that point I decided not to change any of the side parameters, just give it a little bit extra weight capacity. So here we are. Now we're just going to get ready to start pushing things forward. We want to get our launch complex built as quickly as possible. We want our rocket to come out as quickly as possible. However, we also need to time it right so that way we unlock the pieces that we need by the time that we need them. So here we are. Now that we've unlocked solar panels and science experiments for the satellite, we're going to go ahead and load it up with what it needs. Get rid of the light on top in favor for another solar panel, in case that side is facing the sun. And we're going to go ahead and put on these science to the Geiger counter and stuff. We're going to tack them onto the side. However, I do realize later that I don't need to tack these on because there is a place for them in the probe core, and in such a way that it won't add unnecessary torque to one side or the other. So don't pay attention to that. I throw on an extra spin motor on there. It's not something I tested. It's just something I just kind of intuitively put as like, oh, you know, having another spin motor at another time to spin it up even further would be great. But all in all, it doesn't prove necessary. So I realized it was the casters that I accidentally changed to a higher configuration that was telling me that I couldn't build this rocket. Sometimes little things can make the difference. All in all, it's looking good. We've got plenty of delta V. We've got plenty of thrust to weight ratio. I go ahead and load up 2 of those, put those in the build queue, and I come here to the mission control because we have 1 extra slot for contract. Our first artificial satellite needs to be at 150 kilometer perigee, whereas the solar satellite needs to be between 200 and 900 kilometer perigee, and the science satellite requires it to be above 300 kilometer perigee. So we are going to try to aim for above 300, and that should satisfy all 3 contracts. 3 out of the 4. So we're going to go ahead and scrap the second rocket that we built and replace it with a new one because we made a couple changes to it. So we want to make sure that the redundancy rocket is updated with the same changes that we made to the main. So it was around this time that I realized that I didn't need the science experiments tacked around to the side of it, that I could actually just program the avionics units to include those science experiments. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of those. We're also going to get rid of that second Separaton, as I said. It just was unnecessary. And these lights, you didn't see me put these on, but we're going to go ahead and take those off in favor for bigger lights, because those lights just hardly did anything. There we go. It is extra electricity that it's going to be using, but since we're doing a night launch, it's going to pay off. It's worth its weight to be able to see what it is that we're looking at. We're not playing in IVA only mode, so if all we could see is a black screen, that's, you know, not ideal. Okay, make sure the avionics are set to the right size. Let's go ahead and configure this. So as you can see here, there's many more experiments that can be included here, instead of just the thermometer and barometer that I had initially put in there. I do include the early TV camera, which I don't pay attention to at the time, but I believe that is one that you have to recover the sample of in order to get the science. So that is a waste. I could have just left that experiment unchecked, or maybe, I don't know, done something different. But either way, it's not too bad of a thing to have a science experiment that you can't use. And at the last minute here, I take off the RCS because in my testing, I've been able to align myself correctly to the point where I don't need the RCS, and so we're going to run the mission without it, and that will save us some weight as well. And saving weight means increasing delta V, so it's always good. Let's go ahead and get our staging correct once more. And that leaves us with 9600 delta V. So once more capable of achieving orbit, but just barely. So we'll see how this goes. But anyways, here we are on the launch pad, ready to launch for real. Go ahead and throttle up, SAS on, engines ignite, SRBs ignite, everything is nominal, and we are going to just speed our way through this launch. Get a couple shots as we ascend the KSC in its runway. As you can see here, the light really makes a difference being able to see what we're looking at. And at 1 meter per second left remaining in the tanks, we separate our casters. And we start slowly pitching over. We're getting up through the thicker parts of the atmosphere, and once we hit 35 or 33, excuse me, we staged our fairings a little sooner than we probably should have. We later start staging them a little bit later on, and then these fairings decided to cling on for an extra rotation. Thankfully though, that didn't really alter our trajectory very much. Ferrum Aerospace can be a little cruel when it comes to aerodynamics and things like fairings hanging on longer than they should. And this A9 engine just giving it all she's got, burning as much as she can, getting us to as high of apogee as we can. Do a little pre-turn to make sure that I know the correct direction to start rotating our craft in. Then our apogee clears 200 kilometers, and we're going to start paying attention to how far sideways we're going to need to go. And at this point, I look over at something else. I'm paying attention to my phone. I'm paying attention anywhere except for the screen, which is not good. And I missed past the 270 kilometer apogee period where I was going to pitch my rocket over to 0. So as you can see here, I just then learned that I had passed my desired point, which isn't great because then that loses sideways momentum that we could have been getting. And I'm also not paying attention enough to start rolling my rocket, so we very well could have not had a good enough spin stabilization. Thankfully it was stabilized enough, but could have been worse. Should have been paying attention. So we're just coasting up to our apogee, excuse me. And I decided to add the spin stabilization stage down to the ullage stage so we can keep this rotation that we've got going. Our engine ignites with no problem, so now it's just a matter of letting it burn up to the last amounts of fuel, and then we'll be lighting these 2 SRBs in succession, and hopefully, if everything goes correctly, we shall become in orbit. Let's go ahead and speed this up a little bit. And with 10 seconds remaining, we drop out of warp. And the AJ-10 has performed admirably. This was always worried about its first voyage, that it could fail to ignite, it could lose thrust. But no, it performed perfectly. Same with these GCRCs. No failure to ignite. Excellent. And it burns up. And we get an extra 2,000 meters per second delta V off the second SRB. And so that's going to be more than enough to raise our perigee into space. So let's go ahead and watch it and wait for the camera turn. And once the camera goes whipping violently around like that, we have made it. Ladies and gentlemen, we have made it to orbit in RP1. Not the soonest orbit out there. There have been people who've gone there in the early 50s, but utilizing the tech that we had and all the things that we've achieved this far, it was nice. It was nice to see that. So we successfully completed the first satellite contract. Since it's above 150 kilometers perigee, that's all we needed really. So now we have to wait some time for the solar contract to reach its stable orbit for a certain amount of days. The science contract needs to do that as well as transmit a certain amount of science. And the solar satellite also has to be holding a certain amount of science by the end of that orbit. So we're just going to go ahead and time warp our way around and see how this satellite performs. So it becomes clear to me that I'm not going to be able to complete either the scientific satellite because we're not going to be able to transmit it. We don't have enough power. And the solar satellite, I'm not going to be able to complete as well for basically the same reasons. So this satellite is done. It completed the first artificial satellite contract, and for that we're happy. And it shows that we have the capability of reaching orbit. All we have to do is start tweaking a few things and doing things a little bit more efficiently, and we can start reaching bigger and grander goals out of this space program. But here we are. The Space Gazette took a picture of our orbiter, and I am so glad that I put lights on it, because this would have just been a blank image. So there you go. So if you're going to do a night launch, make sure you include some lights. Alright, so we got 12.9 science out of that, which is good. It was able to transmit enough of its experiments, so that's great. We have another one of those rockets in the queue. We also have 2 jet planes that we have ready for the next mission. So let's just go in here real fast and take a peek at what we can do with our science. Early avionics probes are going to be good. Avionics upgrades to make them lighter and more energy efficient, always good, but not necessarily necessary at the moment. Then of course there's my love of solid rocket engines. I can't wait to see what these SRBs do. The new side boosters, new GCRCs. We're also getting pretty heavy into our flight program, so high-speed flight is going to be a must to continue that. We're going to need these new parts. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit research on this right now, and we will come back to the rest of that science once we have better science. And once we're going to have to take another stab at that solar power satellite and science satellite, but that will be in the next episode. Anyways, this is where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more RP1. If you did, please consider giving me a like, drop me a comment, let me know your thoughts, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.